So it's been, you know, and Google Maps has kind of made it more accessible now. You know, Google's problematic.
Can we point it where it is?
Just put the thing where, I annotated it for you, but put it where the camera was. Put it where the QR code is.
Yeah, it's
I know, but
Oh, do it,
on here.
do it.
Yeah, so
so
you want to
I'll
just use
have
the,
Yeah, just
Find
put
it.
that,
Your marker
put that
over.
red dot where your QR code is.
just move the marker.
yeah. I'm not entirely sure because
Well, if you scroll over other way, yeah.
There you go.
Here it is at left or right, we'll try to
yeah.
scroll.
Wasn't that's there?
Yeah, this is the one right here.
Yep. Perfect.
It's right on the window too.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So what's the color thing you said that it?
Okay, now I'll do it for yours. Or you can do it, I don't mind if you want to come and annotate it yourself. You want to do it or should I do it?
And you can do it. I think you can
Okay.
use it well. Yeah.
All right, so where was your?
It was right here.
Okay, so
Where was
that's,
that?
that's
It's in front of
over
Prague.
here, right?
In front of ProArt. Yep, right in there.
And are you going to add these?
Okay, so let's upload, we need to upload your content to archive.org. So
That'll be great.
I'll do that. So as you can see, it's pretty straightforward to upload content to archive. And you know, this is the key is not so much in the file transfer. It's in the symbolic gesture of engaging with the space, working as a team, identifying and discussing the concept of surveillance, figuring out how we feel about it, and then coming up with alternative narratives about that space in terms of the cameras and the social relations between the population, the civic governance of that space, and its recent history in terms of contestation between the population and the powers of authority.
Right, or other
business,
types of
and government.
philosophical positions on surveillance. For example, Sears Roebuck is not civic governance. Sears and Roebuck is a corporation. It has a vested interest like Safeway. If you ever look at Safeway ceilings, I mean, they have so many cameras. Although I've seen people shoplift in there many times. When I've been shopping in that store, I've caught people myself. Not, I didn't catch them, but I've witnessed them doing it. But they still have tons of cameras in their ceiling for all kinds of reasons, like people counting, understanding how to display things. They have different functions. But I mean, arguably, a corporate interest is not it's not civic governance. And it's just is quite intimidating, right? Whereas civic governance might be more the argument of safety, which in some instances, I'm always very grateful there's a camera there. I think it's a good thing, and there have been great stories of cameras. In fact, when we were living in Australia, there was a legal case of some Aborigines who were actually beaten up on a public pedestrian way, and it was caught on video cameras, and the footage was used in court to prosecute the perpetrators, and it was just a really interesting case where a camera did exactly what it was supposed to do from a safety standpoint. So, you know, I think there are just different philosophies of these fixed, and again, these are enclosed fixed worlds. You know, a department store is an enclosed fixed world that represents a capitalist network, and the purpose is to prevent shoplifting. That's probably the primary reason why cameras are in stores.
Concepts
right?
of public safety are very relative. They're not universal. They're relative and need to be understood on a case-by-case basis. There's no universal concept called public safety. And you know, this myth of the universal idea of public safety is very, very charged and misused. And if everyone had a camera on them filming all the time, there would be no need for surveillance cameras. As Steve Mann says, you know, the wearable camera is the sixth gun of today.
Right.
It brings everyone to the same point.
But he himself was like attacked by 2 security guards in the McDonald's when they discovered that he was filming in their McDonald's. They literally almost beat him up. And he's suing them for doing it because they realized he was wearing a camera. Because again, I don't know, now with cameras, you see people with cameras all the time fiddling. I mean, phones have cameras and texting people in a store. But there was a time when you'd be booted out if you were trying to take pictures. This is something generational, right? Take pictures in a store because they think you're stealing the product. So they tell you to put the camera away. I mean, you wouldn't even think of this now because everyone's got a... Still, there are places where if I'm holding up my camera, I do get that sense like, I'm really not supposed to be doing this.
If you're over in the city center development across 14th there, you can take a photograph with your camera, but if you have a video camera in there, security will come and stop you.
Right.
In the public space, because it's still privately owned and privately controlled.
Has anyone here ever been chased out of the store for filming or photography, taking pictures? Or told off by managers?
Somebody recently told us a story which is very interesting, that they went to photograph artwork in the gallery next door.
And got told off for doing it.
Told off because, of course, that could be reproduced or whatever,
right.
you know, the artwork. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Scott was telling us.
Right.
I think
Well, and I do think, I mean, again, I'm just putting on my old
No, go for it.
civil servant hat for a second, sort of that, as you said, I mean, public safety means different things to different people, and I think that there are also questions about power and control and what power and control does government have relative to our corporate society, which is really where a lot of that comes from, because in fact, you know, government doesn't have as much control as
well, we're finding out, right?
And yet we're also, a lot of that surveillance that the government is doing is both, it's kind of to protect everyone. I'm not here to defend every
I'm saying,
action.
but I think this is heightened
and
that's the Trump era because
this is what's so
heightened in the Trump era because just how far this intensely capitalistic individual can spread his individual concept of what he's going to do with the American people and what we're supposed to do in face of his presidency is against what we consider civil society, in my view, like in civil law, right? And civil law and civil society. Like, can our government actually stand up to what he's got planned? Do we have enough checks and balances to counterbalance the weight of what he's already had to kind of sit back, but we still haven't felt the full effect of what he's putting into effect. It raises really big questions, I think, because he doesn't have a concept of civil society that I can find. And I think the questions about this are very important, especially if you haven't grown up and you've grown up assuming it was just okay to walk into a store with a camera, because the apparatus that we're talking about, the apparatus of control that we're talking about, and it's deeply embedded in the walls of all of the buildings around us, and for the purposes of things which are defined as public safety or whatever, is an apparatus that arguably needs constant questioning. Capitalism uses this essentially, I mean, people counting, you're nothing more than a number in their data for profit making. Sometimes you get caught, someone lifting your handbag, that everyone can go, oh, what a great story, her handbag would have been lifted if it hadn't been for our 10 security cameras embedded in the ceiling of our department store. Well, that's a great balance to the fact that most of the rest of the time, every customer in there is totally exploited. Right? And then there's the issue of how we act. And arguably within a surveillance culture, we've learned to be watched.
I did email.
We've learned to be watched. And that's, you know, a very strange idea that we've learned to be watched. And the social control of how would we behave if we weren't under that. In that domain.
So I've got Dan Antler.
because everyone's self-conscious, so self-aware.
Okay, so
And does that make us lazy or more or less like, oh, I don't need to think about safety, there are cameras.
Right. So you know, what's our personal responsibility for
reviews.
Well, and that's part of what I was saying, it's so interesting that getting the specifics of it. I'm working on a project that involves
Dan,
I'm sorry, I don't want to too
I'll go right ahead. Yeah.
What are you printing up on posts? Oh, okay.
They're pretty much.
Yeah. Oh, good idea. That's yours. Great.
I'm doing Dan's
Did you
now.
send pictures?
Cool. Did you know the second one you just printed?
tiaras?
I just pulled it up.
Oh, well,
Did you
that,
print it twice by any chance?
you can almost impossible to tell what they are until you scan them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta make sure it's straight.
So scan it and then tell.
Yeah.
I have it here.
Yeah,
You need an audio recording device.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one. So you can use my video recorder.
That's what I do. This is my phone. I watch the watch. Yeah, we're just talking about like those. I mean, the issues of these apparatuses of state control. You know, if you're from an anarchist standpoint, it's really what It's completely terrifying the degree of law enforcement that, for example, our current administration and arguably every previous administration, at least in the White House, is arguing for. I think we're going to be in an era of even greater. I'm very surprised that they haven't tried to do away with the police cameras, which Obama insisted every cop wear. Why didn't they write that one off immediately? I'm not sure. Just the degree of embeddedness of the idea of being watched, how much social responsibility do we still have to be made?
18-inch.
That one might be.
Yes.
Yeah, no. We're just kind of talking over here. Go ahead, sure. I'd love to hear it.
When we're talking about the safety, right? From being in a state of awareness, you have to be present. Or
I never. Can we have like one conversation? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry.
Great to be with you all. Yeah, nice to meet you. Thanks, Bye.
Is that safety? I'm at odds with wanting safety because it seems like it's more assurance in retribution rather than being safe in the moment. It's not necessarily that that camera being there is it does play a part where it stops somebody. It's preventive. It stops somebody from acting on an illegal desire that they have, right? Doing a crime, whatever it may be. But oftentimes that's not the case. It doesn't necessarily impede as much as it gives like an avenue for seeking retribution. I don't know, and I think that's
from the person who's victimized.
Yeah, the person who's victimized, if they are victimized, that does happen. It's the camera then serves a purpose of being a means through which we can get revenge or find some sort of balance. And I think that's just like it's an interesting thought or an interesting.
In other words, it records something that otherwise would be recorded by language through what the victim says or what the perpetrator says or alleged perpetrator says, like in a legal context. But now you have it on camera. It has more weight than like a testimonial about what happened.
Not necessarily. I feel as if the effectiveness or the use of the camera is almost activated in its ability to bring justice about. Not necessarily prevent any sort of issue from happening.
I think it's a really interesting question.
I was just going to side with you.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, you can do it here. Do it wherever you want. Yeah, outside's good because you've got the ambience.
Right. Actually, I couldn't maybe add to that.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea is really that surveillance is used as an extension of like a legal sort of framework, right? And
sometimes.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's usually law enforcement that is utilizing it,
right?
And it's within that legal context which it creates like these contours for its use, right?
Right.
So it's just that reinforcement of a state sort of imposition, through legalistic means, I think, and that's what you're talking about, as a retribution or as some sort of
what it represents.
force.
That law would be that which you get the retribution.
So it's part of that structure system of like.
Right, the official cameras that are, yes. I mean, which is why really, really just must go back to Oscar Grant, to be honest. It's great that we're on this Plaza. Because when that happened, that cell phone that recorded that event really reversed that. I mean, it was a very important traversal, right? That suddenly what wasn't making us safe was actually that side that's supposedly ensuring our safety. Like the question of, well, who was actually safe in public space? Like, here's this officialdom, you know,
Right.
killing someone on camera that just a bystander, not an official camera, right? It kind of reversed those roles.
And, I mean, there's that debate, you know, whether or not that surveillance can be used to ensure liberties,
Right.
or if it's used to reinforce the state power.
Right.
And I think with the body cameras,
Right.
like I was kind of involved in that conversation.
Right.
Like the ACLU supports it, but within it, like I work with them, like
Yeah.
volunteer and within their different chapters. There's a debate within the ACLU. It's like it's debate. Well, is it good to have more surveillance because it's going to prevent police overreach, or is it actually just creating more of a police state where you're constantly being watched over? And how do you have the civilian oversight? How do you prevent that from being used?
Right.
And,
If you set up a security camera and you point it at people, and whether you let them know or not, you're declaring a power relation. You're stating a power relation. You're saying, I have power over this space. I declare myself dominant here. Listen to this. This is from the Game of War. All the fighting units, this is from their section on communications, all the fighting units' offensive and defensive value, all of its mobility, are entirely dependent on the necessity for that unit to remain in communication with one or another of its army's arsenals. Such communication includes the transmission of information and orders as well as the provision of supplies and munitions. It represents the organic integrity of an army. An arsenal may serve its own side only. So if you knock out communications, you have mastery. If you have communications, you have mastery. It's all about communications. Now, what Oscar Grant demonstrated was even with the supremacy of communications over what was clearly unequal, same as Rodney King, the power of the state to authorize sanctioned, racial murder. That's how embedded racial murder is in our current unequal power system. A man can be shot on a platform in New Year's Eve with impunity in front of all of his friends who are all filming the occasion and go unpunished. And that happened in 1992, and I saw it on
Well, and arguably before the cameras all filming, there was only an eyewitness testimony. You know, these things carry different weight. Now we're accustomed to getting the footage, and it's whether or not the footage is allowed. You know, I mean, it's got like a little bit of a different weight than eyewitness testimony had, or just complete washing it under the rug. It happens so much. We'll speak another story. There's no evidence that it occurred.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting question. I ask myself a lot, like how much surveillance do we just allow ourselves to go on the net, know that we're being tracked, and make all the texts, we cut phone calls we want, knowing that it's easy to listen in. You just do it because we can be teaching them something about the world if they overhear us, or do we protect and encrypt and do every single thing that you need to do to do that? It's very...
There need be no more evidence how much contempt the power elites have for the population. It's in evidence every single second of every single day, in every single corner of every single city in the major Western Hemisphere of the world and in the East. There is no further evidence required for just how unequal the system is. It proves itself on every day. The question is, as Leonard said, what is to be done? And we put forward, as the situationist did, a proposal for a reimagining of life itself, which is to engage with the city in a playful way, such that you transcend the entire argument. You transcend the whole thing, and you reinterpret the whole ballgame. You literally reimagine the entire use of the city as something utterly different from the way it's used. Right? You turn it into a gang hall. You turn it into a party space, or whatever you call it. Right? And when that happens, it's irretrievable. The power system cannot sustain itself because you effectively deprived it of its moral
Or
power.
theoretically, you could gain enough momentum.
Moral authority to just use violence.
Well, okay, but they do have to have some kind of anchor in order to preserve the status quo.
Just
And
power, right?
Yeah.
Well, then
Power has to be defined and has to be agreed to. It can't simply.
Theoretically.
It doesn't have its own engine. You know, it has to be fueled, it has to be supplied, it has to be financed.
It has to be believed in. I mean, theoretically, you can.
It works with the consensus of the population.
Theoretically.
A republic is, a republic is governed by the population. That's the
Theoretically.
definition of a republic.
Theoretically.
It's not an empire. We're in the United States, it's not an empire.
Well, theoretically, you can change people's belief in power. You can change things. So theoretically, you can get enough momentum for a game, for example, to supersede the game that we're playing in, quote, what's real now.
Yeah.
That would be a revolutionary act. It's kind of like taking back to a photograph from the 60s of the hippies putting daisies in the guns of the National Guard, the famous photograph in Life magazine, that Life magazine published. This notion that if enough people did that, or enough people believed in that idea, you could transcend what would come to accept as power. And I think,
Once you start asking questions about power, you ask them at every level of your life. It's something Oscar grants one aspect, but it could be just like who's going to do the dishes. Right? I mean, that's just as powerful, right? Well, you did it last week. I did it last week.
well,
It's like, well, okay, well, I'm not going to ask her to do the dishes. Maybe if I do the dishes now, maybe she'll do the vacuuming later.
it's only my belief that I have to do the dishes.
It's like,
That's problematic.
but it's like power expresses itself at every level of every aspect of life, and conflict needs to be addressed, no matter which culture you're in. And we clearly need new models because Donald Trump isn't working.
Well, that's what's interesting about the current time, I think, because all of the
Because
kind of toolkits that.
capitalism is out of control and it's going to destroy the world. Anyway,
Yeah.
can I have that sound file?
Let me go on. I'll do that and go back.
Do you have their sounds?
Yeah, I've got this sound.
We have Jen sounds? Okay, so
You sent the sound file?
I can send sound. I couldn't do any sound.
You didn't do
You
sound?
guys didn't do
We did
sound?
a sound file, but I don't think
I don't
David had uploaded that one, so I don't know. if
Did
he
you send it
wants
to him? You sent it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've got this. There's one on the map. I just think this.
Oh.
But you guys should have recorded the sound, that was the whole
Let's just check
point.
it over one more time,
Huh?
so maybe everybody gets included.
Well then,
The end result of our workshop are 2 QR codes, some photographs, and a map. So what do we do now? Well,
We'll give you the URL to the map so that everyone has that.
Well, they have it already on their handout.
Okay.
What we do next is we introduce the game of war. We talk about Guy Debord. I try and sell you my books.
Yes.
We want to show you a little bit about Guy Debord, who was the leader,
Yeah, we want to talk about
main
this.
SI person.
Because this game bridges what we've just done with the...
The warrior is one.
Okay.
Those poor guys out there. That guy is sitting there like with flies around. It just kills me. I'm so smelly, but
That is the,
poor what a life. Jeez.
That is the power structure existence.
Yeah, I don't know.
Real life, right? Yeah. Real life.
So Guy Debord, who wrote,
Yeah.
and made the film Society and Spectacle and wrote a lot of major treatises of the situationist international, was the self-conceived leader kind of them. At least the Parisian version, because they had several different councils in other cities across Europe. And they were this radical art group, which this whole show is about, the kind of ideas of the situationists, which were more like tactical media, if you're familiar with that. It's very akin to a lot of tactical media practices. They produced all their own documents. They self-represented, and they just did that very, 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 very solidly and very coherently for about 10 years as a political group of artists. But he made this game, and the game of war, the jeu de guerre. And he claims it's his crowning achievement in situations and to have actually created a game with the rules by which depict exactly what it's like to be in warfare. And we're going to show you a little bit about what those rules are. The factors that are missing, curiously enough, because it's so rainy today, is weather, which affects troops' ability to do anything. So war has to, by like really bad weather, it's on its own. Can't really do much of this. So weather, fatigue, troop fatigue, when troops get tired, it's can't function. What was the other one, David? Weather, troop fatigue, and night and day. There's no night and day in the game. So there's not normal sense of time, weather, or tiredness and exhaustion and fatigue. But otherwise, if you want to bring your chairs over, just have a look, or just come stand around the table. We can talk about the pieces. And we've given you the rules, which are very lugubrious if you read this. It takes a while. We're hoping to work with Natalia on maybe creating some future sessions here at the gallery where because it takes a while to get into it and to really understand. Basically, it's set up on like a binary so that you have a north and a south. One team is north, one team is south. And we can break into two teams. I don't know how many of them are. 2, 3, 4. Oh, there's 8 people.
I have to go, but I'm listening.
Okay, so then we have 1, 2, 3. So we have 6 people if you are the camera person. And then Jen is here, so 6. So you're going to leave now. Thank you for coming. Great input.
You might actually send out as well.
So these are the arsenals, and the arsenals are all that good stuff that David was talking about armies needing, like, I don't know, money, food, shelter, source of resources, water, etc., repair, more guns, obviously. These are the arsenals. And in the game, the arsenals stay put on these specific squares that have the 3 dots. And I lovingly crafted these pieces, I have to say. So, then there are the garrisons, or like the towers, which each army also has 3 of those. These are the infantry. They represent 100 soldiers, foot soldiers. Cavalry, horseback soldiers. Foot artillery and mounted artillery. They have different weights and points in the game. And they can do different things, like they can move a different number of squares, depending. David, do you have that? Can you put that up on the board up there where you, the pieces and what they value or valued at? It's here, but we could just project it, then we could have that.
Yeah.
And then these are the communications with the little flag. So we have mounted communications, and we have, is it mounted? Is that what it's called? Sorry, mounted and foot transmission. So these are your communications pieces. And the objective, when you start out, each team lays out its pieces the way it wants. You don't tell the other side what you're going to do, but these are fixed. These towers are those pieces are fixed. These can all move in different amounts. They have different amounts. And so for example, these guys can move 1 space, and these guys can move 2. And you get 5 moves per turn. Or none. You choose up to 5, or you can do 0 turns and pass. So there's lots of leeway that way. And David and I are still figuring the game out because it's complicated. So these are mountains. These are the mountains. Do you like my mountains?
The aim of the game is to cut off the opponent's lines of communication.
The aim of the game is to cut off the lines of communication because that renders pieces immobile. So you brought up wealth. Right? Mm-hmm. I was just thinking, I lost my phone over the weekend, and part of my atrophy that I felt and withdrawal I felt, because I have it all the time with me, was like a sense of disconnection from some sources in my life, which was really weird when you were describing that before about the armies having to be connected to their arsenal, or they lose power, because in a sense that's what I was experiencing just as a sole agent, was I was cut off from my immediate banking, connection to Facebook friends, like all these things that kind of give me power as a subject. Anyway, so the armies have to be in contact with their arsenals or they can't do anything. And the way that they're in contact is with a clear line of sight and nothing in between them. So the aim of the game is to block movement and prevent the other side from getting to your arsenals. And there's a way that the arsenals eventually get captured and colonized, and if that happens and you lose both, the game is over. So that's kind of it. You can pass through the mountains here, but not here. This is like a pass, and if you can get your piece close enough to that, then you can hop over.
We are starting a bi-monthly gaming night here at ProArts.
Not bi-monthly. Bi-monthly, really?
Well,
I think, really? Well, we're going to try to do gaming here and try to get this so that we can get a few people interested in learning this game with us, because it's very complicated. David, do you want to come and say more about it now?
Sure.
Sorry, I don't know. Did you mention who designed this? Or?
I did. Well, no, I didn't design it. I designed this version of it. But Guy Debord, he designed the game with his wife, Alice Becker-Ho, and other folks, and then they made an actual metal version, which is like the original Le Jeu de Guerre.
There's an excellent website I can recommend.
Called classwar.net.
Yeah, it's called Class War Games.
Wargames.net. Right?
Yeah, classwargames.net, and that has most of the resources you would ever need for this game. The game is based on 18th century warfare, which involved columns of men, almost entirely men, with muskets. And the way it worked is they would shoot, and then the next column would be reloading, and then they would shoot, etc., etc. So it was slow and cumbersome, but it was highly centralized. And these arsenals provided the fighting units. These are all called fighting units, with their supplies. And supplies included, munitions, food, all the things fighting units need. These are the forts. Right. These represent power centers. So
and those can be colonized like this. You can actually hop on that. It's the only square on the board that you can share. You can't try to get this guy by knocking him out. If you get close, what happens instead of you're knocking somebody out off their square by like booting them off their square? In other words, the sense of occupation is not about like owning the squares or property like in chess. It's based more around the number of points. Like if this guy's on the offensive and comes here this close to this guy, he has so many points that are increased in his value as an offensive and as a fender, and this guy's points go down because he has to defend himself.
These can move.
Does that make sense?
These can move two squares in any direction, and but it's important that and so can the cavalry. These are the cavalry. These are the infantry. And
you can move all the infantry. They can all move in concert together. You can do that. Make that one whole move where they move together. Like there's different rules per pieces. So the object of the game, again, you have to have some member of your army has to be in direct line with an arsenal, or you lose power, and actually pieces can become rendered immobile if they get out of touch with the arsenal.
Mountain ranges can block communications from a tower and the arsenals, so you must always maintain line of communication. These little flag guys, they can maintain communication between the fighting units and the towers and the fighting units and the arsenals.
And so, if you're going to play it, we can play it a little bit. We could sit down and you would determine how you want to arrange your pieces, each side, and you don't tell the other side, obviously, because that's state secret. But you move, and then each turn you can move up to 5 moves, and then once you start getting close into each other, it becomes offensive and defensive, and then you add up the points. This is the interesting part of the game. Unlike chess, where you boot pieces off, you never boot pieces off the game board. They either become immobile or they put on the defense or on the offense. And you gain points and lose points, and you add the points up, and then that helps to figure out what you do next in the game.
So typically a side would be seeking to rob the other side of its
arsenals. That's
of
the
its
whole
arsenals,
point.
but also its general coordination and integrity. So a flanking move would break up a group like that. But as soon as you flank a group like this, you leave yourself open to exposure too. So the flanker would become flanked.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's incumbent upon the game player to study military history. Right. And to understand through von Clausewitz and Sun Tzu and other military writers some of the advantages and disadvantages of different conflicts, because no one deployment ever is optimal. all of them have their advantages and disadvantages.
Right.
And conditions can change and so on. But a small under-equipped force can overwhelm a largely over-equipped one quite easily if its planning is good, if it understands the terrain better, if it has the element of surprise, if weather is on its side. There's all kinds of factors that can defeat a more powerful enemy if you have certain factors on your side. But communications is crucial. You have to seize the means of communication. So the primary objective is to neutralize the towers.
The arsenal. Well, you're trying to get to the arsenals. That's what you knock out.
You knock out the arsenals, because in the old days, these would have all the gunpowder in it, all of the food, everything, and that would immobilize an army completely.
So say you have say we're in this situation, and this is, I'm just trying to think about an example where we could show communications being blocked. So say we have, also you're in line like this is in line, or this, it's horizontal, vertical, or on the diagonal, the pieces work. So I'm just thinking, say you have this piece here and the piece gets in the way and blocks the direct relationship between cavalry and arsenal. This guy now is in trouble because he's lost power from the arsenal because this piece is there. So that's what you're trying to do, is to disrupt the relationship of power because every army has to be in contact with the arsenals. You have to have pieces in, or else they lose power themselves. So you have. It has to be
a sense. You have to see at some point a direct line from the arsenal to your forces.
Yeah.
This direction and anyone.
So here it is. This guy's moved in here, and now I'm going to bother him with this piece, okay? Because I don't want him to have to stay there. Then he's cutting off my communication, right? So by doing that, and I'm on the offensive now because I've sidled up to this guy, right? So here you have it. Infantry, when I'm on the offensive, has 6 points. And when I'm on the defensive, which this dude is now, offensive is 4 and defensive is 6. So then this has 2 more points than that point. So it goes into this, which we haven't quite figured out.
You ended up doing all the tallying. So if a cavalry does a charge, you can have like a group of cavalry, 4, move up to 4 points at a time in a charge. It'll deplete them energy-wise, but usually that's the stronger, cavalry were the elite, you had to train them really hard.
It's a little bit like in video games when a piece gains like health or has eaten or not eaten.
It's like Pokemon. It's like Pokemon Go. It's like Pokemon, basically.
Right, it is a little bit like that. They have they lose and gain power depending what they're doing.
Yeah, and artillery can shoot three squares, so you can actually it's a ranged thing, early cannon.
And if you can get your piece this close to a pass, then you have a pass. You have a mountain pass, and you can hop over. If you can get that close, you can hop over to the other side.
So given that we have a grid here, which represents a highly stylized Napoleonic pre-French Revolution battlefield, given that, these are immobile things, the towers are immobile, anyone can claim them, the mountains act as a barrier, except there's a pass here. Here's a pass here as well. This is an abstraction of a 1700s battlefield. Given this, and given the activity that we've done today out there, where we've basically done some reconnaissance, if you like, on the plaza, and we've identified some key places on the plaza, which suffice to say, a few cameras, and how we feel about those cameras, and how we feel about those spots where the cameras are, how might some of these methods of abstraction work to help us develop a board game based on Oscar Grant Plaza.
Right.
So that would be the third or fourth and final chapter of the workshop today, taking some of these basic principles of the game of war and applying them to Oscar Grant Plaza.
Or other principles you can think of. I mean,
other principles. So having made the map on the open map and having uploaded the content to archive.org and having populated the plaza with active live QR codes that trigger sound files of poetry and thoughts, we should now make a board game.
Right, so what we're gonna
More
do
than
is
one board
invite
game.
you to, we've got like pieces and we've
Yeah.
got paper, and to conceive of the Plaza as a potential game board. It's kind of a nice enclosed
Yeah.
shape, we've got the maps. We're just gonna kind of brainstorm for the last part of the.
Essentially, it's a matter of brainstorming a board game based on some of the principles of the game board. So we have, if you want to come over here, guys, I'll show you.
Have a seat around the
Just
table.
head out.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, just now. Is there more, are there more, things
Yeah.
happening? in the coming
That's
days?
it. For this show, yes, she's got a roster of different, Jen, you would know what's happening here in the gallery.
Don't forget my books if you want to buy a book. That's 15, that's 10.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So all.
Culture check. I was here in the 90s and it's a record of
Oh,
my
close on an event.
Oh, nice. Like sort of like graffiti type.
graffiti,
public.
zines,
There's a couple more.
yeah.
Like
the whole-
Adbusters type?
Oh, like yeah,
They're
no,
mentioned
fine.
in there, yeah. Adbusters was part of it, yeah. But this was more street level, that was more the commercial stuff. Yeah. Okay, let's make a game.
Thank you.
I would like to just, we can just bring.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Okay.
So, just trying to clear some space on the table. If anyone wants paper,
Okay, I'm gonna take this way.
So maybe we should
put out a mark.